Paris under the Eiffel Tower. Spring is timidly looming on this April 15th. Like every year, a true automobile museum is settling in the City of Light for this edition inside a pop-up version of the Grand Palais.
Oh, elle est incroyable. Oh, c'est vraiment de l'art, quoi.
Nearly 240 vintage cars, the oldest built in 1938 and the most recent in 1982, will take part in the Tour Auto, an event that Patrick Peter created 33 years ago, taking inspiration from the Tour de France automobile. Year after year, the event is a popular media-wise and sporting success.
Il y a des gens qui sont là pour gagner. Bien entendu, ça fait partie.
There are people here to win, for it's a competition after all. But at the same time, we like to create a sort of a harmonious event. These are not the 18-year-olds aiming for a career in motorsports after all. We want everybody to have fun and that every competitor and every car gets to the finish in Cannes unharmed and undamaged. Cannes indeed hosts the finish, and everyone hopes to reach the city after 5 stages, which will take the competitors from Paris to Beaune, Clermont-Ferrand, Valence, the Paul Ricard circuit, and finally the Croisette. Nearly 2,500 kilometers, including 4 races on circuits and 9 time stages on closed roads. A unique competition format. In the previous edition, Thierry Boutsen, former F1 racer and 3-time Grand Prix winner, dominated the competition. Obviously, he was the big favorite for this year's edition. I will try to do better than last year. It was so much fun last year, then I had a choice, either I quit or I continue. But I really want to be part of this extraordinary event, and that is more important to me than stopping on a win. It is an extraordinary event. This formula is not overused and the fans are not mistaken, because from Monday the exhibition is open to the public, followed by an evening cocktail, and it attracts a big crowd before the start at dawn on Tuesday morning. It's the start of a dizzying 5-day descent to the Mediterranean. Tuesday morning. All vehicles go for it at dawn to avoid traffic jams on the ring road and be in time for the official start. This year, the start is given at the castle of Vaux-le-Vicomte. Delicately bordered by its French gardens designed by Le Nôtre, the castle created by Nicolas Fouquet, superintendent to Louis XIV, would later form the inspiration for the Palace of Versailles. A gorgeous setting to get acquainted with 2 exceptional cars. And we start with the elder of the two. It's a 1938 Coupé Ventoux. Built in 139 units, this Bugatti Type 57, in its original colors and powered by an atmospheric 8-cylinder inline engine, took its 4 passengers to 140 kilometers an hour. In its time, this was a very fast car. It was a bit like the current GT cars. It's not a heavy car. It is not as low as the Atalante, but it's very light. It has a wooden frame. It's covered by an aluminum body, so it's a pretty light car. Unfortunately, the pretty Ventoux Coupé will not see Mont Ventoux, because from the second stage, René and his wife Dominique have to retire due to a mechanical failure. That is not the case for the other jewel that caught our eye at Vaux-le-Vicomte, a Jaguar XK120. This car did the 1953 Tour Auto with a driver called Emilio Eminenti at the wheel. An original car with a history directly related to the Tour de France automobile. It gives its owner a certain responsibility, but also plenty of pleasure. Lots of pleasure, for a machine has a soul and a history. It's not just metal and oil, it's a story written by many generations. A story that still goes on, thanks to the passion of knowledgeable collectors such as Pierre. I found this car with a collector in the south of France. He had it for 40 years and had nearly never driven it. So this beauty shook off the rust and the dust and found its way from Paris to Cannes, giving many spectators an eye and an earful. The pleasure of the senses. There is nothing more real when one evokes the passion for the vintage automobile. This car got all the votes on this edition of the Tour Auto. Imagine, a Le Mans prototype registered to drive on the open roads of the road sections, on the narrow and winding special stages, and of course on the circuits. This Ferrari is a 512M, M for Modificato, modified. For the base of this car is the 512S. The Ferrari engineers pushed it even further to the limit to enter the car in the 1971 World Endurance Championship. Even crazier is that the 512M also participated in the Tour de France automobile at the time. So let us pay tribute to Mr. John of B, the most enthusiastic of enthusiasts, never hesitating to take this kind of car out of his collection to participate in the Tour Auto.
La valeur des voitures aujourd'hui.
The value of this kind of cars makes that many a collector prefers to keep their cars in a perfect state rather than drive them. And that's a pity. These are racing cars. You have to drive them and let others enjoy them. These are cars to drive on circuits or on open roads like this one. I enjoy driving the car as much as sharing it with the spectators. And there are many spectators on the side of the roads and in the stopover towns. Not only to admire the cars, but also the work of the mechanics. Because each evening, all cars are revised and some even repaired.
It's a disaster. The first day we need to change the engine because the oil, the temperature of the oil increase, the temperature of the water increase. Well, better don't call about this.
How many times do you need to change the engine?
I think that 3 hours.
Old engines often have lots of whims. It's essential to give them a thorough warm-up before tackling a day of racing. However, for Olivier and Nathalie Breitmeier, it's not sure whether they will compete on the stage between Beaune and Clermont-Ferrand. Unfortunately, we lost a nut of a ball bearing on the road section towards the stopover. It's a very specific part. But fortunately, we can count on some great mechanics. They drove to Switzerland. It's an 8-hour round trip to get to Bath. And they go back at 6 a.m. and are now waiting for us outside the Parc Fermé to make the necessary repairs in 15 minutes so we can continue.
Quand on freine, cette pièce justement qu'on a perdue ici.
That part I got lost tends to unscrew itself. So now we developed a system to hold the part in place to avoid the repetition of the same issue.
La dérouiller puis avoir le même problème.
Olivier and Nathalie can get underway, and they are heading, as are the other competitors of the Tour Auto, towards the winding Bresse circuit. The races on the circuit are held by grids formed according to the production years of the cars. There's 2 regularity grids with red numbers and 3 competition grids, recognizable by their black numbers. It's all about a certain balance, because the perfect car to win the Tour Auto does not exist. Some are very efficient on the circuits, like the Ford GT40s or Olivier Breitmeier's BMW M1, but they are less performant on the narrow and winding roads of the special stages. So the circuit aces do everything to gain some time on the tracks and lose as little as possible on the stages, much to the delight of racing enthusiasts. But the Tour Auto is not only about competition. The event reinvented by Patrick Peter also celebrates the French way of life. Each year it offers an exceptional drive on the roads of France. The road sections are a real treat, and as icing on the cake, each lunch stop is a real discovery, held at places found of the beaten track. We found some unusual places, yes. Like here, we are inside a chapel.
On a mis seulement 4 parasols pour qu'ils soient à l'ombre de ce côté-là.
Donc là, tout est prêt, le chaud, froid, ils peuvent se servir de tout. Alors déjà, on suit le tracé imposé.
So of course we follow the course of the event. But each year we try to find new locations. And that's not easy, for it has to be possible to park all the cars as well. And there are more cars every year. During the Tour Auto, the competitors will have lunch in the garden of the 17th century castle of Count Bussy-Rabutin, in the living room of the seigneurial residence of Pierre Clos, take a break in Parentignac, the little Versailles of Auvergne, or even smell the scent of wisteria in the gardens of the Abbey of Saint-Eusèbe in the Vaucluse. A short hour of lunch break before the crazy adventure towards the south continues. Next stop, the Auvergne to reach Clermont-Ferrand.
« 224 parti à 32, le 225 au départ. 228 parti à 37, 229 au départ, 229 au départ.
Épingle très serrée droite.
And obviously in this region the roads are twisty and winding, with some notable elevation changes. Very nice special stages requiring a sharp eye, because at the Tour Auto the crews only have a concise roadbook indicating the danger and changes of direction. The actual route of the special stages is kept a secret until the start. And in this game there's a veteran who's doing quite well. Henry Pescarolo is at the wheel of a Shelby Cobra, the car with which he won the Tour Auto in '97. But Pesca is even better known for his Tour de France automobile participation at the wheel of Matra prototypes. And when it comes to the applause meter, he's unrivaled.
C'est extraordinaire, c'est quand on voit.
This is quite extraordinary. In this so-called anti-car era, you can see plenty of spectators standing along the roads to admire the cars. These people just love cars. And the Tour Auto is a unique event. There's nothing like it anywhere else. It's circuit racing, special stages, hill climbs, it has everything. And the organization is extraordinary as well. It has no equal. At the foot of the Puy-de-Dôme lies the Charade circuit, with its impressive elevation changes. It's the start of the third day of racing.
Salut. Salut Grégory, ça va bien? Et toi? Tout va bien? Ça va? Tu vas bien? Right. Everything okay?
Oh, I really love the smell. I don't know what it is.
The coffee is here.
That's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
It's the perfect opportunity to dwell for a moment on certain cars that are put into the spotlights this year, the vintage English automobiles. Let's start with what is undoubtedly the most imposing of all.
It's a Jaguar Mark 7, built in 1954.
In the words of its owner, a real boat on four wheels.
The 1950s Jaguar had both sports cars and luxury saloons, and this is luxury saloon. So 3.4 straight six engine, very, very comfortable on long distances. Not so slow, but on a circuit, I think you have to work quite hard with this car.
In the 1950s and 60s, Jaguar obviously was the English brand of reference for luxury cars. But it had also very elegant two-seater sports cars from the XK line, the 120, 140 and 150, all available in coupe, roadster or convertible versions. Many XKs were at the start of this Tour Auto, but there were also two incredible and sublime C-types. These C-types were the racing cars from Coventry, derived from the XKs at the time. They monopolized victories at Le Mans and on circuits around the world. It was on these cars that the first disc brakes appeared in racing. C-types have become very rare now on modern roads or in current competitions. Let's continue our hunt for rarities in the Sherrard paddock with this strange convertible.
This car is a Nash Healey.
This car was born from a completely fortuitous and amusing meeting between two Brits.
And this came about as a consequence of Mr. Healey going over to America to try and get engines supplied by an American company, but failed. So a keen photographer, he was on his way back from America on the ship, and he met Mr. Nash, who was also a keen photographer. They discussed, and Mr. Nash was somebody who produced engines, so they formed a relationship to create the Nash Healey.
200 copies of the Nash Healey were built, all reserved for the US market. And there are only some 20 cars left in the world today. The organization of the Tour Auto is a well-oiled machine. The course is secured by several road openers at the wheel of modern cars to ensure flawless safety on open and closed roads. Like every year, the Zero car is driven by Eric Hellary and the Double Zero by Mr. Ari Vatanen. The Finn has lost none of his driving abilities, but there is an element that the organizers cannot predict: the weather. The least we can say is that between Sherrard and Valence, the weather gods were not so lenient. In these conditions, it is better to be a bit cautious, especially when driving an exceptional car like this beauty in its scarlet dress. It's a Ferrari 250 Millimiglia. The story of this beaut is quite epic. It was destroyed by fire twice before Diego found it, or what was left of it. Some 8 years ago, we bought what was left of it, the engine, parts of the chassis, and then we rebuilt the car with the specifications it had in 1953 when it participated in the Millimiglia. Fortunately, we found lots of pictures with lots of details of the bodywork, and we really tried to build the car like it was in 1953. The result of the rebuild is simply splendid, and Diego took the car to Cannes without any issues. That's also the case for another exceptional machine, closely linked to Ferrari. It's the Alfa Romeo Giulia TZ, with TZ standing for Tubolare Zaccato. The machine is a racing car designed by Busso and Colombo, who had left Ferrari, and the aluminium body is obviously made by Zaccato. These TZs are now impossible to find, so it was an honor to see the Argentinian team Martin and Francisco Soccari at work on the roads of France. The longest special stage of the Tour Auto proved to be fatal for the halfway leaders. Thierry Poutin and Hervé Ordioni went off the road in very spectacular fashion. Fortunately without any harm to the crew, but the Shelby was destroyed. While Stage City Valence is a completely different classification, the organization is welcoming the caravan of survivors. There will be some 230 cars, which we will have to park here, and there will also be some 30 Ferraris, which we will park at the end of the service park, and they can get out this way.
Ok, parfait. Salut Com, comment vas-tu? Ça va et toi? Bonne journée? Ouais, impeccable. Ça s'est monté facilement? Ouais, écoute, normalement on est bien en place.
Well, normally we should be ready. The whole of the park is ready and dinner will be served over there. We're just waiting for the cars.
On n'a plus qu'à attendre les voitures. Bravo Com et bravo aux équipes. Merci.
The pop-up park is ready to welcome the competitors at the end of a trying day.
La première voiture ici à Valence de compétition, du groupe compétition, la numéro 151.
It was a very long and complicated stage. We're not used to have such long stages on the Tour Auto. But everything went well for us. We set the fastest time and we took the overall lead today. So yes, we're pretty happy, but it's not an easy position to defend. There's plenty of good drivers behind and the gap is only a couple of seconds. Start at 6:58. In 72 kilometers, it's the Saint-Nazaire special stage, followed by the Ventoux, and then the Paul Ricard circuit.
Bonjour. Ça va?
194. Deux fois. Bonjour.
During this fourth stage, the first signs of the south become visible. Right off the bat, the day begins with a motorsports monument, Saint-Nazaire-le-Désert, an iconic stage of the Monte Carlo Rally.
Saint-Nazaire-le-Désert, c'est...
Saint-Nazaire-le-Désert is really an iconic stage. I watched it on television back in the day. We were proud and happy to be here. It has the look of a small GT car, a line worthy of the greatest Italian coach builders, but in a certain way, this car is a real imposter. It's a Fiat 850. If you take away the dress, it's the same car as the one next door's. Oh yes, a pretty dress can sometimes fool the finest of experts. Originally, this was a pseudo sports car because Moretti, for this one, or other coach builders, just changed the bodywork, not the mechanical parts. This was not aimed at being a sports car, it just pretended to be one. It wanted to be some kind of exclusive machine, maybe for the doctor's wife. So here we are in the Var, and we will soon go to the circuit to have fun. It's another great adventure. This video is almost a culmination of a great educational project. Yannick and François are teachers at Garac, the National School of Automotive Trades, and their educational project was to participate in the Tour Auto. We acquired a VW Beetle, then we completely stripped the car. Yannick took care of the bodywork and there was plenty to do. We took it fully apart and noticed there was plenty of rust on the car. So we had to rebuild all the parts we could no longer use. And then afterwards, together with the pupils, I took care of rebuilding the car and the mechanical side as well. Obviously, this project created a bond with the pupils. These youngsters really like old cars. And what is funny is that some of our former pupils are now part of service crews of the Tour Auto. The circle is complete, it's great. Without mechanics, it's impossible to complete the Tour Auto. It is not Nicolas Leroy-Fleuriot who will say otherwise. He broke the suspension on one of the stages. Everybody lent a hand. We did not have a welding station in the truck, so we stopped at a car workshop. And the owner, he helped us out. His welding station was really top-notch, and Damien, he's a professional welder, repaired the broken parts and even managed to strengthen the suspension. And it only took an hour.
Circuit du Castellet, équipage Ammonio du Par, voiture 76. Top! On arrive à 3 cônes. Hein?
Voilà, 3 cônes, attention.
Tu me donnes le top aux 3 cônes.
Pour les 3 cônes, attention au top. Top
2,31. Panneau pit lane?
Oui. Pit lane. Top
07, 307. C'est bon.
We're on board the winning car of the Tour Auto in the regularity category. A sharp exercise in which only super specialists do well. Everything is based on averages, which are to be respected, with 2 hand stopwatches as the only calculation tools. So you'd better be fully prepared for this.
C'est assez complexe, on a 3 méthodes.
It's quite complicated, yes. We use 3 methods to be able to triangulate and be as precise as possible. And then we have these extensive data sheets, allowing us to make very precise calculations. There's plenty of them, and we put them all in the boot of the car. And then there's a number of assumptions. What happens if this happens? And what if we use the tires too much? And what if we shift here? So we have plenty of tables, and then my driver listens to my indications every time I say top. On the Paul Ricard circuit, at the end of the 4th stage, the cars on the regularity grid stood on the brakes, while those on the competition grids let their hair down until sunset, much to the delight of the photographers and cameramen.
Bonjour messieurs. Bonjour messieurs. Voici vos paniers pique-nique.
Tenez, vous avez les itinéraires pour vous arrêter sur le chemin avec des beaux points de vue.
Bonne journée!
It's a tradition on the Toronto, the picnic. Of course, this stage is not chosen at random. It's the ideal way to offer the competitors the opportunity to make the most of an extraordinary setting, such as that of the Gorge du Verdon. This is the sports model. For the normal model is called Vauxhall Victor. Parked in this marvelous setting is one of the most popular cars ever, a very affordable vintage car.
Vauxhall parmi toutes ces Ferrari qui valent des millions.
A Vauxhall among Ferraris and other cars that are worth millions, that's the difference that makes it interesting. But in the end, the passion for vintage cars reunites us as well. During dinner, we simply talk cars, whether the person across the table has a 2 million car and ours is a 10,000 one. Everybody is equal, and our little grey car is recognized as well. After the crossing of the Verdon, all that remains is a gentle slide towards the Croisette. For the crews aiming for the win in this Toronto 2023, it's all about not making any mistakes. The fine fight in regularity ended with the third place for Pouls and Pratt in a Mercedes 300 SL, behind last year's winners Martins and Pic in a Mini, while Hamonio and Dupart pocketed their second victory in the Toronto.
On peut leur réserver un applaudissement, mesdames, mesdemoiselles, messieurs, Eric Hamonio, Jérôme Dupart.
In VHC competition, the fight was intense until the end. With their Jaguar E-Type, the Bonardel family finished on the podium, preceded by the Anglo-American crew of Wakeman Blakeney and a Shelby Cobra. In Cannes, Sébastien Berchon and Sébastien Bourdier realized their dream by winning the Toronto. A beautiful victory, celebrated as it should be. It's a dream come true. I did my first Toronto in 2017 and I never could have imagined being able to win it. I'm very, very happy. The 2023 edition of the Toronto was once again a great vintage. Everyone has already agreed to meet next spring for the next edition, with a finish that should take place in the southwest of France.